My name is Scarlett. I'm 38 years old. For 18 years, I worked double shifts as a nurse to save $199,000 for my daughter's future, only to watch my own mother steal every penny and laugh in my face. The air in the backyard smelled like charred burgers and the sweet, heavy scent of blooming jasmine. It was the kind of humid June evening that makes your clothes stick to your back, but I didn't care. I stood by the grill, my nursing scrubs replaced by a breezy sundress, watching Maya laugh with her friends. Maya, my daughter, my heart outside of my body. She was wearing her graduation cap tilted back on her head, her blonde hair catching the last rays of the golden hour. In a few months, she would be at Johns Hopkins, the first step toward the medical career she'd dreamed of since she was 6 years old. "Mom, you're burning the buns," Maya teased, sliding over and bumping her shoulder against mine. "I'm just adding flavor," I joked, though my hands were shaking slightly. It wasn't just the heat, it was the weight of the secret I was about to share. I pulled a small, folded piece of paper from my pocket. It was a bank statement I'd printed that morning. I had spent 18 years working double shifts, picking up the holiday shifts no one else wanted, and wearing the same pair of sneakers until the soles were thin as paper. Every extra cent had gone into this. "Maya, come here," I said, pulling her toward the quiet corner of the patio. "Is everything okay?" Her smile faltering. I handed her the paper. "This is for you, for your future." Maya looked down, her eyes widened, tracking the numbers across the page. Total balance, $199,450.00. "Mom," she gasped, her voice cracking. "How? You always said things were tight." "They were," I whispered, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I never wanted you to feel the weight of a loan. I wanted you to walk into that university with your head high, knowing you're already free. That's your college fund, baby. Every penny." We hugged, and for a moment the world felt perfect. I looked over Maya's shoulder and saw my mother, Eleanor, standing by the sliding glass door. She was holding a glass of expensive Chardonnay, probably bought with the emergency money I'd lent her last month, watching us with a strange, tight-lipped smile. "What a lovely moment," Eleanor said, her voice smooth and cold as a river stone as she stepped toward us. $1,900,000. That's quite a lot of flavor you've saved up, Scarlett." I felt a brief chill despite the heat. I'd forgotten that years ago, back when I was a 19-year-old single mother and couldn't even get a bank account without a cosigner, I had put her name on that trust. But that was a lifetime ago. We hadn't used that account together in over a decade. "It's Maya's future, Mom," I said firmly. "Of course it is," Eleanor purred, taking a long sip of her wine. "The future is so unpredictable, isn't it?" I didn't think much of it then. I was too happy. I was too proud. I didn't realize that the woman who gave me life was already planning how to steal mine. Monday morning felt like the first day of the rest of my life. I walked into the First National Bank with Maya's tuition invoice tucked into my purse like a sacred relic. The lobby was quiet, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee, the air conditioning humming a steady, low-frequency tune that usually calmed my nerves. I sat across from a young teller named Kevin. He had a kind face and a headset that looked slightly too big for him. "Good morning, Kevin. I'd like to wire the first installment for Johns Hopkins University," I said, unable to keep the grin off my face. It's a big day. That's a great school. Congratulations to the student, Kevin said, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. I just need your account details and the routing number. I handed him the folder. I felt light, almost buoyant. 18 years of stress felt like it was evaporating. I watched him type, waiting for the familiar confirmation, the little receipt that would prove I'd finally done it. I'd protected my daughter. But Kevin stopped. His eyebrows knitted together. He clicked the mouse once, twice. Then he frowned, his eyes darting across the screen. Is there a problem? I asked. My stomach did a small, nervous flip. Maybe I wrote the account number down wrong? One moment, Miss Miller, he murmured. He stood up and walked over to a glass-walled office in the back. I watched them through the pane, him and a woman in a sharp gray suit. They were looking at a monitor, then at me. A cold prickle started at the base of my neck and raced down my spine. The woman in the suit, the branch manager, Mrs. Gable, walked back with him. She didn't have a congratulations smile. She had the look of someone about to deliver a terminal diagnosis. Miss Miller, I'm afraid there's an issue with the education trust account, she said, her voice hushed. What kind of issue? I asked. My voice sounded thin, like it was coming from a long way off. Is the system down? The account was closed on Friday afternoon, she said. The entire balance was withdrawn via a cashier's check. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the mahogany desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Closed? That's impossible. I didn't close it. I'm the primary holder. You are, Mrs. Gable said gently. But as this was an older trust account, it remained a joint access account. The co-signer, Eleanor Miller, came in at 4:30 p.m. on Friday. Since she had full withdrawal rights, we had no legal grounds to stop the transaction. The world went gray. The smell of the floor wax suddenly turned nauseating. I could hear my heart thudding against my ribs, a dull, frantic drumming. She took it? All of it? The whole $199,000? Mrs. Gable nodded solemnly. The account balance is currently $0.12. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, a terrifying, icy clarity washed over me. I remembered my mother's face at the party, the way she'd looked at that bank statement, the way she had said the word unpredictable. She hadn't just taken money. She had reached into Maya's chest and stolen her future. She had taken 18 years of my sweat and blood and turned it into a cashier's check. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out of that bank and into the blinding June sunlight, the heat hitting me like a physical blow. I got into my car, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key into the ignition. I didn't head to work. I headed to the upscale suburb of Oakcrest. I headed to the house I had been helping pay for. I headed to see my mother. I drove to Oakcrest in a trance, my grip on the steering wheel so tight I thought the plastic might snap. I pulled onto her street, a line of perfectly manicured lawns and weeping willows, and there it was, parked in the driveway of the house I'd spent a decade helping her keep, was a brand new slate gray Mercedes-Benz. The sun bounced off its polished hood, blindingly bright. It looked like a predatory shark idling on the pavement. I didn't even turn off my engine. I slammed the door and stormed toward the front entrance. I didn't knock. I used my key, the one she'd given me in case of emergencies. The house smelled of expensive lily-scented candles and something sharp, new leather. I found her in the master bedroom. She was standing in front of her full-length vanity, draped in a silk robe, clasping a heavy, sparkling diamond necklace around her throat. On the bed lay several shopping bags from boutiques I couldn't afford to breathe in. "Mom," I rasped. My voice sounded like it had been dragged over gravel. Eleanor didn't flinch. She adjusted the necklace, tilting her head to catch the light. "Scarlett, you're home early from work. Is something wrong?" "The bank," I said, stepping into the room. The air conditioning was cranked up so high I could see my breath, or maybe I was just shivering from the rage. "The account is empty. Tell me you didn't." She finally turned around. She didn't look guilty. She looked satisfied. "Oh, that. Well, I decided it was time to stop living like a pauper, Scarlett. This house is drafty, the neighborhood is declining, and frankly, I've done my time." "Done your time?" I stepped closer, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "That was Maya's college fund. 18 years. I worked double shifts until my feet bled for that money. How could you take it from your own granddaughter?" Eleanor let out a soft, melodic laugh that made my skin crawl. She stepped toward me, the silk of her robe hissing against the carpet. "I gave you life, Scarlett," she said, her voice dropping into that chilling, condescending tone she used when she wanted to remind me I was lesser. "I spent 18 years raising you, sacrificing my youth so you could exist. Consider that money back pay for the years I suffered as a mother. Maya is young. She can take out loans or work a job, build some character like you're always bragging about." She walked over to the bed and picked up a brochure for a luxury high-rise condo in Florida. She patted my cheek with a hand that felt like ice. "I'm moving, darling, somewhere with a view and a concierge. So really," she leaned in, her eyes dancing with a cruel sort of triumph, "thanks for the early retirement. It's about time you did something for me." She laughed again, a sharp, jagged sound, and turned back to her mirror, dismissing me as if I were a servant who had overstayed her welcome. I stood there in the center of the room, surrounded by the things she had bought with my daughter's dreams. The grief I'd felt at the bank was gone. In its place was something hot, dark, and focused. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Things are unpredictable." I turned and walked out. I didn't look back at the Mercedes. I didn't look back at her. I sat in my car and took a deep, shaky breath. She thought she had won because she had the cash. She forgot that I was the one who had kept her life running for the last 10 years. She forgot that I knew where all the bodies were buried. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Hey, Sarah, it's Scarlett. I need the best forensic accountant you know, and I need them now." I spent the next 6 hours buried in a mountain of manila folders and digital bank statements in my small home office. The only light came from the blue glow of my laptop and a dim desk lamp that flickered every time the air conditioner kicked on. The air smelled of old paper and the bitter, burnt dregs of my 4th cup of coffee. My heart was still a cold lump of lead, but my brain was moving at 100 miles an hour. 10 years ago, when the economy had dipped and Eleanor was on the verge of losing the family estate, I had stepped in. I was a young nurse then, finally making decent money. I had co-signed a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, to pay off her mounting debts and keep a roof over her head. At the time, I thought I was being a good daughter. "Stupid," I whispered to the empty room, flipping through a dusty folder. I was so stupid. But as I scanned the documents, I saw it. Because I was a co-signer and had been the one making the interest payments for a decade to keep her credit score from tanking, I wasn't just a helper. I had legal standing. The house wasn't just hers. Legally, we were tied at the hip. And more importantly, the terms of that HELOC were strict. Any significant change in financial status or unreported windfall had to be disclosed to the bank, or the loan could be called in full immediately. Then I found the second piece of the puzzle, My friend Sarah, who worked in real estate law, called me back at midnight. "Scarlett, I ran the title search on that condo your mom was bragging about." Sarah's voice was crisp over the speakerphone. "She put down a good faith deposit of $50,000 on Friday. The closing is set for tomorrow afternoon. But here's the kicker. She listed her current home as clear of encumbrances on the application to get the condo's homeowners association approval." "But it's not clear," I said, a slow heat rising in my chest. "It has a 6-figure lien because of the HELOC I co-signed." "Exactly," Sarah said. "She lied on a legal financial disclosure to secure the new property. That's mortgage fraud, Scarlett. And because she used funds from a joint account that was technically structured as a uniform transfers to minors trust, even if your name was on it, she's crossed a line into a very gray area regarding fiduciary duty." I looked at the clock. 1 a.m. "How fast can we move?" I asked. "If we file an emergency injunction at the courthouse when it opens at 8 a.m., we can flag those funds before the condo closing at 2 p.m. If the bank sees she's moving money while the HELOC is in default, which it will be the second you stop paying that interest tomorrow morning, they'll freeze everything." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Eleanor wanted to talk about back pay. She wanted to talk about character. I pulled my laptop closer and drafted a short, professional email to the bank manager. I wasn't the tired, grieving daughter anymore. I was a woman who had spent 18 years protecting a child. Eleanor was about to find out that a mother's protection doesn't stop just because the money is gone. "Maya," I murmured, looking at a framed photo of my daughter on my desk. "I'm going to get it back." The sun hadn't even cleared the horizon when I sat at my kitchen table and did something I hadn't done in 10 years. I logged into my primary checking account and canceled the recurring interest payment for my mother's home equity line of credit. With one click, the safety net I'd kept under her for a decade vanished. Without that payment, the loan would technically fall into default alert status by the time the bank's computers ran their morning cycle. By 7:45 a.m., I was standing outside the county courthouse. The air was crisp and smelled of damp pavement and the exhaust of early morning buses. Sarah met me at the steps, clutching a leather briefcase. She looked sharp in a navy pinstripe suit, her eyes behind her glasses showing the kind of focus that made me glad she was on my side. "Ready?" she asked. "More than," I said. We walked into the building, our heels clicking sharply against the cold marble floors. The silence of the courthouse felt heavy, like a held breath. Sarah's team had been working through the night to draft an emergency petition for a lis pendens, a legal notice that a property's title is in dispute, and a temporary restraining order on the $199,000. Because the funds originated from a trust intended for Maya's education, Sarah explained as we waited for the clerk, we're arguing that your mother committed a breach of fiduciary duty. She didn't just withdraw money, she misappropriated assets from a minor's intended benefit. We spent the next 3 hours in a whirlwind of bureaucracy. I signed affidavits until my hand cramped. I watched Sarah argue with a judge in a hushed, intense sidebar. At 11:15 a.m., the judge's gavel hit the wood with a satisfying thwack. "The injunction is granted," Sarah whispered, a small, predatory smile playing on her lips. "The bank has been served electronically. The condo closing is officially flagged. Those funds are frozen." My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from the bank's automated system. "Alert. HELOC account ending in -4402 is past due. Immediate action required to avoid foreclosure proceedings." The first domino had fallen. "Now what?" I asked, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs.
"Now," Sarah said, checking her watch, "we go to the bank. I've already contacted the fraud department. Since Eleanor lied on her condo application about the house being clear, the bank that holds her mortgage is going to want a very long, very uncomfortable chat with her." As we walked back out into the bright noon sun, I felt a strange sense of detachment. I thought of Maya, who was currently at school, oblivious to the war being waged for her future. I thought of my mother, probably at a luxury spa or a boutique, blissfully unaware that the ground was already shifting beneath her designer heels. The clock was ticking. Eleanor had 3 hours before her life began to disappear.
The air in the bank's private conference room felt different than it had yesterday. Yesterday, it had been the air of a funeral, heavy, suffocating, and final. Today, it was sharp with the smell of ozone from the nearby printers and the clinical scent of industrial cleaner. It was the air of a battlefield. Mr. Henderson, a senior fraud investigator with silver hair and eyes as cold as a winter lake, sat across from Sarah and me. He flipped through the injunction papers we had just secured. "Ms. Miller," he said, looking at me over his spectacles, "in my 20 years here, I've seen family members do a lot of things. But emptying a trust for a grandchild to buy a Mercedes and a luxury condo, that's a new level of bold." "Is the money still there?" I asked. I didn't care about the boldness, I only cared about the survival of Maya's dreams. "The $199,000 was moved into a holding account for the condo closing. Because of the court order Sarah filed this morning, we were able to intercept the transfer. The funds are currently flagged. They can't be touched by the seller, the dealership, or your mother." A wave of relief washed over me, so strong I felt dizzy. So she can't buy the condo? She can't buy a pack of gum with that money right now. Furthermore, since she claimed the Oak Crest property was unencumbered on her new credit application, we've opened an internal investigation into mortgage fraud. And because the HELOC you co-signed is now in default, the house, what happens to the house? We've started the notice of default process. Since you've officially withdrawn your financial support and flagged the fraud, the bank is calling the entire loan. She has 24 hours to cure the default, or we begin the seizure of the Oak Crest property. I looked at the clock on the wall, 1:15 p.m. In 45 minutes, Eleanor was supposed to be at a celebratory luncheon before signing the final papers for her new life in Florida. She was probably sitting in a high-end restaurant right now, sipping a mimosa and looking at the slate gray Mercedes through the window. "There's more," Sarah added, sliding a document toward me. "The dealership where she bought the Mercedes, I called their financing department. I informed them that the funds used for the down payment are currently under a legal freeze and are the subject of a criminal fraud investigation. They don't like high-risk assets. They've already dispatched a tow truck to her current address." The systematic dismantling of Eleanor's ego was happening in real time. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the house she used to look down on me, the car she used to show off, and the luxury she thought she had earned at my expense. "She's going to call me," I said, my voice steady. "Let her," Sarah said. "The more she talks, the more evidence we have. But remember, Scarlett, don't give her an inch. She didn't give Maya one." I stood up, thanking Mr. Henderson. As we walked out of the bank, my phone began to vibrate in my purse. I pulled it out. The caller ID showed a picture of Eleanor, smiling at a gala. I didn't answer. I watched the screen glow until it went dark. Then it started again, and again. The panic had begun. The grand ballroom of the Willow Creek Country Club was a sea of shimmering silk, black tuxedos, and the suffocating scent of lilies and expensive cologne. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen explosions from the ceiling, casting a sharp, unforgiving light on the who's who of our town. I stood at the entrance, still in my nursing scrubs. I hadn't had time to change, and honestly, I didn't want to. I wanted Eleanor to see exactly who was taking her down, the daughter who worked the double shifts she'd mocked. I spotted her near the stage, a glass of vintage champagne in one hand, the other resting on the lapel of a man I recognized as a local real estate mogul. She was wearing that diamond necklace again. It caught the light every time she threw her head back to let out that shrill, triumphant laugh. "And the Florida condo is just the beginning," I heard her voice carry over the soft hum of the string quartet. "A woman of my stature deserves a certain coastal tranquility. My daughter was finally able to pay me back for all those years of maternal investment, you see?" The man nodded, impressed. "A generous gift, Eleanor." "Oh, it was the least she could do," she purred. I walked toward her. The crowd parted, eyes lingering on my wrinkled scrubs and tired face. I felt like a dark smudge on a white canvas. "Mom," I said, my voice cutting through her laughter like a blade. Eleanor rose. Her smile didn't disappear, it just stiffened into a mask of polite annoyance. "Scarlett, what on earth are you doing here? And in that outfit? This is a charity auction, not a clinic." "The auction's over, Eleanor," I said, stepping into her personal space. I didn't whisper. I wanted the mogul to hear. I wanted the women in their pearls to hear. "I'm here to return something of yours." I pulled the thick legal envelope from my bag. At that exact moment, Eleanor's phone began to ring. She ignored it, her eyes boring into mine. "Don't be dramatic, Scarlett. Go home." "Answer your phone, Mom. It's the dealership. They're at your house right now with a flatbed truck. Your new Mercedes is being repossessed because the funds you borrowed are under a criminal freeze." The color drained from her face so fast, it was like watching a candle go out. Her phone rang again, then a third time. "What are you talking about?" she hissed, her voice trembling. "And this," I said, handing her the envelope, "is a notice of acceleration for the HELOC. Since you lied on your condo application about the house being clear, the bank is calling the full balance. You have 24 hours to pay 6 figures, or the bank seizes the house." She grabbed the envelope, her manicured nails tearing the paper. Her eyes darted over the bold, red-stamped words, "Notice of default, mortgage fraud investigation." You can't do this," she stammered, the sophisticated mask finally cracking. "I'm your mother." "You're a thief who laughed while you stole a child's future," I said, leaning in so close I could smell the champagne on her breath. "The condo deal is dead. The seller is keeping your deposit as a penalty for the fraudulent disclosure. You have no car, no new home, and by this time tomorrow, you won't even have a roof over your head." The room had gone silent. The string quartet had stopped playing. Every head in the ballroom was turned toward us. Eleanor looked around, her eyes wide and wild, searching for a friendly face. But these people weren't her friends. They were her audience, and the show was over. "Thanks for the memories, Mom," I said, echoing her words from the bedroom. "But I think your retirement just got a lot less coastal." I turned and walked out of the ballroom. As the heavy oak doors swung shut behind me, I heard the first sob break from her throat, a high, pathetic sound that was quickly swallowed by the rising whispers of the crowd. The dust settled faster than I expected, leaving behind a silence that was finally peaceful rather than heavy. 2 weeks later, I sat at my small kitchen table. The morning sun was streaming through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The smell of fresh coffee and toasted bread filled the room, simple, honest scents. On the table sat a final letter from the bank. Because the funds had been flagged as a misappropriation of a minor's intended trust, and because Eleanor's condo deal had collapsed under the weight of her own fraud, the legal system had ground out a victory. After legal fees and the penalties Eleanor had forfeited to the condo developer, $181,200 had been returned to Maya's account. It wasn't the full amount, but it was enough. It was her future, saved from the wreckage. Mom, do you think I can fit my heavy coat in the suitcase, or should I just wear it on the plane? Maya stood in the hallway, surrounded by cardboard boxes and half-packed bags. She looked younger than she had a week ago, the stress lines around her eyes finally smoothed away. Wear it, I said, walking over to help her zip a bulging duffel bag. Baltimore gets cold, and you'll want it the second we land. Maya stopped pulling at the zipper and looked at me. She didn't ask about her grandmother. She knew. She'd seen the for sale sign go up on the Oakcrest house. She'd seen the moving van that took away the designer furniture Eleanor couldn't actually afford. Thank you, Mom, she whispered, throwing her arms around my neck. For everything. I know how hard you fought. I'd do it 1,000 times over, I said, burying my face in her hair. Later that afternoon, after I dropped Maya off at her friend's house for a final goodbye party, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was local. I pulled over to the side of the road, the gravel crunching under my tires. I answered. Scarlett? The voice was thin, reedy, and stripped of all its former velvet. It sounded like an old woman's voice, tired and bitter. Hello, Eleanor, I said. The apartment it's damp, Scarlett. The walls are paper thin. I can hear the neighbor's television through the vents. There was a pause, a wet, shuddering breath. The bank took everything. I have nothing left. I'm 60 years old, Scarlett. How am I supposed to live like this? I looked out the windshield at the horizon. I thought about the 18 years of double shifts. I thought about the sneakers with the worn-out soles. I thought about the look on Maya's face when she thought her dreams were dead. You told me Maya should work a job to build character, Mom. Maybe it's time you did the same. I hear the local diner is looking for a hostess. It's not a concierge, but it's a start. You can't be serious, she gasped. I'm your mother. You owe me. I don't owe you anything but the truth, I interrupted. And the truth is, you had a daughter who loved you, and you traded her for a Mercedes you couldn't keep. I felt a sudden, strange lightness in my chest. I remembered the way she had laughed at me in her bedroom, the cruel, mocking sound of a woman who thought she'd won. I let out a soft, dry laugh, the exact same pitch she had used. Thanks for the house, Mom. It's going to make a lovely down payment on Maya's medical school. Wait, Scarlett, please. I didn't wait. I pressed the red button, blocked the number, and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. I put the car in gear and drove toward the sunset, heading home to a house that finally felt like mine.